He looked straight into my eyes and said, "You're overreacting. It's all in your head." And for a moment, I almost believed him. But what he didn't know was this. While he was rewriting the truth with his words, I was recording every single second of it. Hi everyone. Before we begin, if you enjoy real-life stories about betrayal, truth, and quiet revenge, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps this channel grow and allows us to keep sharing powerful stories like this one. Now, let's get into today's story. The first time Adrian told me I was overreacting, it seemed so small that I almost laughed it off. It was after dinner with some of his coworkers. Nothing fancy, just a casual evening at a trendy restaurant downtown. People were laughing, sharing stories about office drama, deadlines, and impossible clients. Adrian looked relaxed the entire night, charming as always. The kind of man who knew exactly when to smile and exactly what to say. But there was something else I noticed. His phone. It kept lighting up on the table beside him, over and over again. Each time it buzzed, he would glance down quickly, type a short reply, then flip the phone over like it didn't matter. At first, I ignored it. Work messages, probably. But when it happened for the 6th or 7th time, curiosity started creeping in. "Busy night at the office?" I asked lightly while sipping my drink. Adrian chuckled. "Just my assistant. We've got a project deadline coming up." That explanation should have been enough. It sounded normal. But something about the way he said it felt rehearsed, almost automatic. Later that night, when we were driving home, the silence in the car felt heavier than usual. Streetlights flashed across the windshield as we moved through the empty roads. I stared out the window for a moment before finally saying what had been on my mind. "You were texting her a lot tonight." Adrian glanced at me briefly. "Who?" "Your assistant." He let out a small laugh, like the idea itself was ridiculous. "Lena, seriously? You're overreacting." The word hit me harder than I expected. Overreacting. He said it so casually, so confidently, like the conversation had already been settled before it even started. "I'm not accusing you of anything," I said quietly. "I just thought it was a lot." He shook his head, still smiling like I had told a harmless joke. "She's helping me finish a proposal, that's it." Then he reached over and squeezed my hand. "You worry too much." The conversation ended there. Technically, he explained everything. There was nothing left to argue about. And yet, something inside me still felt unsettled. Not because of the texts, but because of how quickly he dismissed the question. When we got home, Adrian walked inside like nothing had happened. He dropped his keys on the counter, loosened his tie, and turned on the TV. Normal, completely normal. Meanwhile, I stood in the kitchen pretending to check my phone, trying to ignore the strange feeling sitting in my chest. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter. Everyone has stressful weeks at work. Deadlines happen. Assistants text their bosses. There was no reason to turn something small into something big, so I let it go. But as I went upstairs that night, I heard Adrian's phone buzz again in the living room. He picked it up almost immediately, and for just a second, I saw the smile on his face before he noticed I was looking. That was the moment the feeling in my stomach returned, and this time, it didn't feel small anymore. After that night, I tried to forget about it. Life moved on the way it always did. Adrian went to work early, I focused on my own schedule, and our evenings fell back into their usual routine. Dinner, television, small conversations about the day. Everything looked normal. But once you notice something strange, it becomes hard to unsee it. The late-night messages started happening more often. Not every night, Adrian was careful about that, just often enough to create a quiet pattern. Sometimes his phone would buzz while we were watching a movie. He would glance down, read the message, then casually flip the phone face down on the coffee table. Other times, he would take the phone with him when he stepped out to the balcony. "Work," he would say if I asked. Always work. One night, I walked into the kitchen and saw him typing quickly on his phone. His expression changed the moment he noticed me. The screen locked instantly. "Who was that?" I asked. "Just the office group chat," he replied without hesitation. Then he smiled, the same calm smile he always used when a conversation was about to end. "Don't start overthinking again." There it was. Not an answer, a warning. I nodded and pretended it didn't bother me, but the strange feeling inside my chest kept growing. A few days later, something else caught my attention. I was checking our shared credit card statement when I noticed a charge from a restaurant I had never heard of. It was expensive. 2 dinners, 2 cocktails. Wednesday night. I stared at the date for a long moment. Wednesday. That was the same night Adrian told me he had stayed late at the office finishing a proposal. At first, I told myself there had to be a simple explanation. Maybe it was a client dinner. Maybe he forgot to mention it. So that evening, when Adrian came home, I asked casually while we were setting the table, "Hey, have you ever been to a place called Belmore Kitchen?" He froze for just a second. Just a second. Then he shrugged. "Oh, that? Yeah, client meeting last week." I watched his face carefully. "You said you were working late that night." "He was," he replied immediately. His tone changed slightly, becoming sharper. "Lena, seriously, are we doing this again?" I hadn't even accused him of anything, but he sighed dramatically, rubbing his forehead like he was already exhausted. "You're overreacting," he said. "It was just work." Suddenly, the conversation wasn't about the restaurant anymore. It became about my trust issues, my imagination, my tendency to create problems. And somehow, by the end of the discussion, it was I the one apologizing for bringing it up. Again. That night, we went to bed in silence. Adrian fell asleep quickly, his breathing steady beside me. But I stayed awake, staring at the dark ceiling. Something wasn't right. Not the restaurant, not the messages, not the way every question somehow turned into my fault. For the first time, a thought crossed my mind that made my stomach tighten. What if the problem wasn't that I was overreacting? What if the problem was that Adrian was very, very good at making me doubt myself? The idea refused to leave my head. And 3 nights later, something happened that made me realize just how dangerous that doubt really was. The moment everything changed didn't happen during a fight. It happened during a joke. Adrian had invited a few coworkers over for drinks on a Friday night. Nothing unusual. Our apartment had become the unofficial place for casual gatherings. Music playing softly, glasses clinking, conversations flowing from one topic to another. I stayed mostly in the background, refilling snacks and listening while they talked about work. Office politics, deadlines, annoying managers, the usual. At one point, one of his coworkers, Mark, started telling a story about a cheating scandal in another department. Apparently, a guy had been secretly seeing someone from accounting for months before his wife found out. The table erupted in laughter. "Man, that guy got sloppy," Mark said, shaking his head. Another coworker raised his drink. "Half the guys here would be in trouble if their wives checked their phones." More laughter. But something strange happened in that moment. Adrian didn't laugh. He just took a slow sip of his drink and stared at the table. Quiet. Too quiet. No one else seemed to notice. The conversation moved on quickly to something else, but the silence stayed with me. Later that night, after everyone left and the apartment finally settled into quiet again, I found Adrian in the kitchen washing glasses. I leaned against the counter. "You got really quiet earlier," I said. "Earlier when?" he asked. "When Mark was telling that story about the cheating scandal." He shrugged without looking at me. So, Nothing, I just noticed. Adrian turned off the faucet and grabbed a towel. Lena, he said with a tired sigh, you're reading way too much into things again. There it was, the familiar phrase, you're overreacting. But this time, instead of feeling embarrassed, something else happened. Something clicked. Because I suddenly realized something about our arguments. Every single time I asked a question, the conversation followed the same pattern. First, he dismissed it. Then he reframed the situation. And finally, the focus shifted from what he did to how I was feeling. My emotions became the problem. My reactions became the evidence. My doubts became the crime. And once that happened, the original question disappeared completely. It was like watching a magician redirect an audience's attention, except the audience was me. That night, after Adrian went to bed, I sat alone on the couch thinking about it. If someone constantly tells you you're irrational, eventually you start believing them. You stop trusting your own instincts. You stop asking questions. You stop noticing things that don't make sense. And suddenly, a terrifying possibility crossed my mind. What if that was the whole point? My eyes drifted toward the hallway where Adrian was sleeping. For a long time, I just sat there in silence. Then I picked up my phone. The idea felt ridiculous at first, petty, paranoid, almost embarrassing. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. If every conversation ended with him saying I was overreacting, then maybe the only way to know the truth was to hear the conversation again later, exactly as it happened. So I opened the voice recorder on my phone and tested it once. The small red recording icon blinked quietly on the screen. I stared at it for a moment before turning it off. I didn't know if I would actually use it, but I knew one thing for sure. The next time Adrian told me I was overreacting, I wouldn't rely on memory anymore. And a few days later, that decision would capture something Adrian never meant for me to hear. 3 days later, the opportunity came. I wasn't looking for it. I wasn't snooping through his phone or searching for evidence. It happened by accident. Adrian had come home late and tossed his jacket over the back of a chair before heading upstairs to shower. The apartment was quiet, except for the sound of running water. I was cleaning the living room when the jacket slipped from the chair and fell to the floor. Something small slid out of the pocket, a receipt. At first, I didn't think much of it, but when I picked it up, my stomach tightened immediately. Belmore Kitchen, the same restaurant from the credit card statement. But this receipt was different. It wasn't just the charge, it was the date. Friday night. Tonight. 2 entrees, 2 cocktails. My hands felt cold as I stared at the paper. Adrian had told me he was staying late at the office again. He had even texted me earlier that evening. Busy night, don't wait up for dinner. But this receipt said something else entirely. I stood there for a long moment, listening to the shower upstairs. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. This was the moment, the one I had imagined ever since I downloaded the recorder. Slowly, I pulled my phone out of my pocket. For a second, my thumb hovered over the screen. Was I really doing this? Part of me wanted to put the receipt back and pretend I never saw it. But another part of me, the part that had spent weeks doubting myself, needed answers. I opened the recorder. The small red icon appeared again. Recording. Just as I slipped the phone into my pocket, the water upstairs stopped. A minute later, Adrian walked into the living room, drying his hair with a towel. He looked relaxed, comfortable, like someone who had nothing to hide. "Hey," he said, "you're still awake?" I held up the receipt. "Adrian, can we talk?" He frowned slightly as he stepped closer. "What's that?" I handed it to him. For a fraction of a second, something crossed his face. Shock. Real, unmistakable shock. Then it vanished. His shoulders relaxed and he let out a soft laugh. "Seriously?" he said. I felt my chest tighten. "You told me you were working tonight." "I was," he replied calmly. He placed the receipt on the table like it meant nothing. "That was a client dinner. You didn't mention it, because it wasn't important." The calmness in his voice almost made me question myself again. Almost. "But there are 2 dinners on the receipt," I said quietly. Adrian sighed heavily, rubbing the back of his neck. Here we go again. There it was. The tone, the one that made every conversation feel like my fault. "You're overreacting." The words came out smoothly, like he had practiced them. It was a meeting. People eat during meetings. "But honestly," he interrupted, shaking his head, "I don't understand why you keep doing this." Now his voice carried a hint of frustration. "Doing what?" I asked. "Turning normal things into problems." He looked at me with that same disappointed expression I had seen so many times before. "If you keep acting like this," he said slowly, "you're going to destroy our marriage over nothing." For a moment, the familiar guilt started creeping in again. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was pushing too hard. Maybe... Adrian's phone buzzed loudly on the coffee table. Both of us glanced at it. The screen lit up briefly before going dark again. Adrian grabbed it quickly and slipped it into his pocket. "Work," he said. Then he leaned down and kissed my forehead. "Try to relax, okay?" And just like that, he walked down the hallway toward the bedroom, leaving me alone in the living room. The silence that followed felt heavy. Slowly, I pulled my phone out of my pocket. The recorder was still running. The red icon blinked quietly on the screen. For a moment, I considered deleting it. Maybe the conversation really had been pointless. Maybe I was making things bigger than they were. But something made me press play. At first, it was just our voices, the questions, the excuses, the same argument I had already heard. Then, halfway through the recording, something new appeared. A faint audio notification, followed by a voice, a woman's voice, soft, barely audible, but clear enough to send a chill down my spine. And when I heard what she said, I realized Adrian hadn't just lied to me. He had made one very dangerous mistake. At first, I thought I had imagined it. The recording played softly through my phone speaker, filling the quiet living room with the sound of our earlier conversation. My voice, Adrian's voice, the same argument I had just lived through minutes ago. I almost stopped listening, but then I heard it again, a faint notification sound, the subtle ping of a message arriving, right after Adrian had slipped his phone into his pocket. I leaned closer to the speaker, turning the volume up. The recording crackled slightly as the audio continued. My question, his sigh, then something else. A voice, not mine, not Adrian's, a woman's voice. Soft, almost playful, like someone leaving a quick voice message. Text me when she stops asking questions. My entire body went still. For a moment, the world felt strangely quiet, like all the air had been pulled out of the room. I replayed the recording, again and again. Each time, the words became clearer. Text me when she stops asking questions. My hands started shaking. The voice had come from Adrian's phone when the notification arrived. I hadn't noticed it in the moment because the conversation had distracted me. But the recorder caught everything, every word, every sound, every mistake. A strange calm settled over me as the realization sank in. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't overreacting. Adrian had been lying, and whoever that woman was, she clearly knew about me. She knew exactly what was happening in that living room. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone in my hand. Part of me wanted to run down the hallway and confront him immediately, to demand answers, to play the recording right in front of him and watch the lies fall apart. But another part of me, the quieter, colder part, stopped that impulse. Because if Adrian had been manipulating every conversation until now, then confronting him too early would only give him time to prepare another story, another excuse, another way to turn everything back on me. No, if I was going to do this, I needed more than one recording. So that night, I saved the audio file and backed it up to my laptop. Then I emailed a copy to myself, just in case. Over the next few days, I started noticing things I had ignored before. Adrian began taking more calls outside. He angled his phone screen away from me whenever it lit up. Once, I even saw the same restaurant receipt tucked into his briefcase again. Different date, same place, Belmore Kitchen. But the biggest surprise came 3 nights later. Adrian had fallen asleep on the couch while watching television. His phone slipped from his hand and landed on the carpet beside him. The screen lit up. A message preview appeared. Just one line, but it was enough to make my heart pound. Dinner tomorrow? Same place. I slowly picked up the phone. For the first time in weeks, I finally saw her name, and the moment I read it, I realized something that made the entire situation even worse than I imagined. Because the woman Adrian had been secretly meeting was someone I already knew. For a long time, I just stared at the name on Adrian's phone. It felt unreal. Out of all the possibilities I had imagined over the past few weeks, this was not one of them, because the message wasn't from a stranger. It was from Vanessa, Adrian's assistant, the same person he had casually mentioned the night I first asked about the late messages, the same person he insisted was only helping with the project. My chest tightened as everything finally connected. The constant texts, the receipts, the voice in the recording, and now, the name. But instead of confronting Adrian right away, I did something else. I waited. Over the next few days, I quietly gathered everything. The audio recording, the receipts, the credit card statements, even a screenshot of Vanessa's message when it appeared again the following night. By the time I finished, the truth wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was a timeline, a pattern, proof. A week later, Adrian and I sat across from each other in a small office downtown. He looked calm, almost confident. He had spent the last few days telling our friends that I had been acting strange lately, that I was imagining problems that didn't exist, that I had been overreacting to everything. When the lawyer asked if either of us had something to add before the meeting ended, Adrian spoke first. "Honestly," he said with a tired sigh, "I think Lena has just been misinterpreting a lot of things." Then he looked at me, that familiar expression again, the one that had made me doubt myself so many times before. She tends to overreact. The room fell quiet. The lawyer turned to me politely. "And you, Lena?" I slid my phone across the desk. "Just play the audio," I said. Adrian frowned. "What audio?" The lawyer pressed the screen. The room filled with sound. Our voices, the argument, Adrian calmly telling me I was overreacting, then the notification, and finally, Vanessa's voice. "Text me when she stops asking questions." Adrian's face went completely pale. For the first time in weeks, he had nothing to say. No explanation, no argument, no way to twist the story. Because the truth wasn't my memory anymore. It was evidence, and evidence doesn't care who calls it an overreaction. Sometimes the most dangerous thing someone can do is convince you that your instincts are wrong, that your feelings are irrational, that your questions are the problem. But the truth is, your intuition exists for a reason. And when someone keeps telling you you're overreacting, it might be because they're afraid of what will happen if you stop doubting yourself. So trust your instincts, listen carefully, and remember, the truth has a way of revealing itself. Thank you for watching this story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more powerful stories like this one. And I'll see you in the next video.